Hello friends, today I'm going to answer the very important question, what happens if a buyer defaults on a land contract? Well, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what happens and what steps are involved when a buyer defaults on a land contract and how both buyer and seller protect their interests. Have you ever wondered what options are out there if a buyer stops making payments on the land contract? What type of legal process is even involved? Well, let's get after it by first explaining what a land contract is and when it's typically used. Then I will explain both the responsibilities of the buyer and the seller when it comes to land contracts. Finally, I will explain what happens if a buyer defaults on making its payments under a land contract and how you can protect yourself as a real estate investor. If you're ready, let's go. A land contract is a legal agreement for a seller-financed purchase that does not involve the bank or any other mortgage lenders. Instead, the buyer makes periodic monthly payments to the owner or the seller, and he keeps making those payments until it is paid in full. So essentially, the seller is becoming the bank, and a land contract is sometimes called a contract for deed or a bond for title. So now let's talk about the components within a land contract. One, you have sales price of the property, which is pretty standard, but agreed upon by both buyer and seller. Interest rate at which the buyer will pay. Now this is interesting because a lot of times in a land contract, the interest rate is going to be higher than what they could get with a traditional mortgage. And the reason for that is because they can't get a traditional mortgage. And you as the seller are taking on a little bit more risk because you are borrowing or lending or allowing the buyer to buy something from you over a period of time where you become the bank. And this person could considerably be a much more risky prospect because if the bank's not willing to loan to them, but you are, that's definitely more risk in your pocket. The third component is the cadence of the monthly payment. Typically it's monthly, and when is that due? And then there's going to be the amount and due date of the balloon payment at the end of the contract. Now, if it's amortized over 30 years, that's easy. Every single month, it'll be paid off in 30 years or 15 years, depending on how long the mortgage is. Or if it's amortized over 30 years, but there needs to be a balloon payment after, maybe say 10 or 15 years. Now, a balloon payment is just at a certain point in the future, the entire loan balance is due. And typically the buyer might need to refinance in order to make that balloon payment. Another important component is what's called equitable title. And this is really for the buyer, and it prevents the seller from reselling to a third party or taking out any liens on the property. Because think about it, as the buyer, you own this property, right? You might not legally be on title until the last payment is made. But if you don't have an equitable title and the seller gets greedy and goes out and sells it to somebody else, or he gets some liens against it, that's going to be extremely challenging and a legal mess for you to undo once you find out that's happened. And an equitable title will take care of all of that. Another component is an assurance to make sure that there's no taxes or liens owned on the property. And the final component is requirements to have the land contract recorded with a proper government agency. So when is a land contract typically used? Many times it's used as a seller financing option, as I mentioned, but it's with a buyer who maybe has a poor credit history. He doesn't have much of a credit history at all, or he's been through some challenging situations like a foreclosure or a short sale that preclude him from getting a bank loan or any other traditional financing. Another scenario might be if the buyer doesn't have enough money for a down payment to purchase the home. Now, a strategy where it's typically used is something called a slow flip. And this is a strategy that I'm currently using, and I utilize land contracts all the time in this strategy. And a slow flip, essentially, when you get a property at a very low price, I'm trying to get properties 25 to 30% below asking price. And then I will turn around and I will sell it to somebody at 25 to 30% higher than I got it for. Now, because I'm doing that, trying to get a low price, I might see one offer accepted out of about 10 to 15 offers that I put out there on different properties, right? So I have to make a lot of offers. And I'm paying for this property with cash, but not my own cash. I'm utilizing a private money lender that is lending me money anywhere between 8 to 12%. I have some right now that are lending to me at 8 and 9%, which is fantastic. So I can buy that property outright. That's what gives me the power to negotiate at such a lower price because I'm closing in 30 days and paying cash. Once I have that property, I am going to pay back my private money lender as if I were paying back a car loan within 5 to 7 years. So that payment might be a little bit higher, but I'm also going to the buyer who's buying it from me, charging them a higher interest rate, and I'm terming it out over 30 years. But I want their payment coming to me to be a little bit higher than the amount that I'm paying the private money lender, because I want their mortgage payment to cover my payment to the lender. And after 5 to 7 years, when it's completely paid back to the private money lender, I have that money coming in every single month for the next 23 to 25 years. So it is a fantastic strategy that works really well, and it benefits those individuals that aren't able to get a traditional loan. And I'll tell you what, I know some people who've been doing slow flips for probably the last 5 to 6 years, and they have probably 50 to 100 slow flips under their belt, and they're coming up to that time period where their payment to the private money lender is done. And guess what's happened? If your mortgage payment's around $950 or $1,000 and you have 50 of those properties, that's a pretty good monthly income coming in for the next 23 to 25 years. So what happens if the buyer defaults on a land contract? So before I answer that completely, there are 2 things that I would like to include in a land contract that I didn't mention above, but are extremely important to have inside there. Number 1, that is including who is responsible for maintenance, repairs, taxes, and property insurance. And because the buyer is buying it from you, he will be the homeowner. It is just like any other homeowner purchasing. They're the ones responsible for that, but that should be included in the land contract and specified out. There should also be within a land contract a default clause. And this should say what should happen if the buyer stops making payments. And this is important because there's a real possibility that this person could stop making payments. And where you're the bank and you're not a traditional bank, you don't have the tools and resources to do some of the traditional investigations on the potential buyer like a bank would. You might not be pulling their credit history. You might not be seeing their bank statements or their W-2 or tax returns. And you haven't decided whether they're creditworthy or not, and chances are they might not be. So them defaulting could be a real scenario. However, this is why a land contract is so important and really favors the seller. The seller is taking the risk of allowing a potentially non-creditworthy individual to come in and buy a property from him or her. Because now, if this buyer defaults on making payments, the seller has the ability through a land contract to evict that buyer rather than foreclose on them like a bank would. And this is the beauty of a land contract. You can act like a landlord without having the landlord responsibility. So if they stop making payments, you evict them as if they were a tenant renting a property from you rather than foreclosing, because a foreclosure process, as you know, can be extremely drawn out and tiresome and really take up a huge legal process. Now, the challenging thing for a buyer under a land contract is if they did default, all of those payments they made prior to defaulting, they would never get those back or never see those. Those would all go towards the seller, which would be understood because essentially those could be considered rent payments. If you were to break your lease on a rental and stop making payments, all of the payments you made before that are still going to go to the landlord. A very similar thing in a land contract. So this is why I stress the importance of having a default clause in your land contract so you know exactly what is happening if the buyer ends up defaulting. So defaulting on a land contract is definitely favoring the seller. It's still a situation I doubt they would want to go through. The best case scenario would be that the buyer is making all of their payments all the time and everything goes smoothly. But I've done enough of these and seen enough of these to know that sometimes they do default on their payments. And because of that, that's why utilizing a land contract is so important if you as the seller are then going to become the bank and take on that risk. Now, these are some things that I've seen when it comes to defaulting on land contracts, but I'd be interested in any feedback you have on land contracts. So please comment below. Let's engage in a dialogue. And as always, just for stopping by and watching my video, I have a free gift for you. It's a short-term rental calculator where you put in all the input of the purchase price, the income, the expenses, and it will actually spit out to you whether it's a good deal or not. And it's 100% free, no questions asked. Just click on the link below, aaronsfreetraining.com. Once again, thanks for stopping by. Have an amazing day.